South Carolina has always had long, quiet roads, two-lane stretches where the trees bend inward like they're whispering secrets to anyone who passes. For most people, those roads feel peaceful, but for decades, a shadow moved along them. A man small in size, but towering in cruelty. His name was Donald Pee Wee Gaskins. To the people who knew him, Pee Wee was unremarkable, barely 5'4", weighing just over 100 pounds, a man who laughed too quickly and talked too much. But behind those darting eyes lived a storm that no one truly understood. Chapter 1. The Making of a Monster. Born in 1933 in rural South Carolina, Gaskins came into a world that offered him little kindness. Poverty was everywhere, opportunity nowhere. By the time he was a teenager, he had a reputation: troublemaker, thief, someone always in the center of chaos. Adults talked about him in hushed tones. Kids avoided him. Teachers simply tried to survive him. He bounced in and out of reform schools, each stay hardening him a little more. He would later claim those years changed him forever, teaching him the twisted belief that the world only respected violence. Whether that was an excuse or a window into his mind, only he truly knew. When he reached adulthood, Pee Wee stepped onto those long Carolina roads with a new purpose. His crimes grew darker, bolder, more unpredictable. Chapter 2. The Hitchhiker's Road. The South in the 1960s was different. People hitchhiked freely, trusting strangers to carry them through small towns and pine-lined highways. But Pee Wee Gaskins treated those roads like hunting grounds. He drove an old car with rust creeping along the doors and dust coating the dashboard. If he saw someone alone, a drifter, a young wanderer, someone who looked lost, he would slow down, flash that crooked grin, and offer a ride. Most people who got into his car never saw the next sunrise. Gaskins would later boast about his crimes, exaggerating, twisting, and performing for anyone who listened. He told investigators he had dozens of victims, maybe more than 100. To him, each number was simply another way to inflate the legend he carefully crafted around himself. But beneath the bravado was something far colder. A man who saw vulnerable people as objects to control. His actions filled the state with fear, even if police didn't yet know who the shadow behind the disappearances was. Chapter 3. The Coastal Kills. In the early 1970s, whispers began to spread through the coastal towns of South Carolina. People vanished along the marsh roads, young women, drifters, people passing through. When families reported them missing, Gaskins was nowhere on the radar. He didn't look like a threat. He didn't act like a mastermind, and he didn't fit anyone's idea of a serial killer. But he knew the backroads better than anyone, paths where the trees grew so thick they almost erased the sky. These were places where cries vanished before they ever reached open air. Gaskins later described these crimes as coastal kills, though investigators believe many details were embellished. Still, the pattern became undeniable. A predator was moving undetected through South Carolina, and he was growing bolder. Then, he made a mistake. Chapter 4. A Crime Too Loud to Hide. In 1975, Gaskins committed a murder so reckless, so bold, that it shattered the quiet veil he had operated under for decades. This time, the victim wasn't a stranger. It was someone he knew, someone connected to people who cared enough to demand answers. The investigation turned sharp and immediate. Friends turned into witnesses. Stories began to surface. Gaskins could no longer hide in the shadows of rural roads. Detectives followed the trail, and for the first time in years, Pee Wee felt something unusual: fear. When he was arrested, he tried to charm police, offering half-truths and contradictions. But they had enough to keep him, enough to start unraveling the spiderweb he had woven through the state. As investigators closed in, Gaskins realized the world he built was crumbling. And in a final act of twisted pride, he began confessing to crimes past, crimes forgotten, crimes investigators didn't even know existed. Some confessions were real, some were likely fantasy, but all of them chilled the room. Chapter 5. The Penitentiary Legend. Inside the South Carolina State Penitentiary, Pee-wee became something like a ghost story. Guards whispered his name. Inmates avoided him. Even behind bars, he found ways to manipulate, intimidate, and harm. He often bragged, claiming he had killed over 100 people, though only 9 were ever confirmed. To him, numbers weren't facts. They were tools to stretch his myth into something monstrous. Eventually, his time ran out. After plotting a murder, even from inside prison, Pee-wee Gaskins was sentenced to death. And on September 6, 1991, the man who once roamed the Carolina backroads met his end in the electric chair. Some people felt relief, others felt unease. Because long after the execution, questions lingered. How many victims were there truly? How many stories would never be told? How much of his legend was truth, and how much was his final manipulation? South Carolina would never know for sure. Chapter 6. The Roads Today. If you drive through rural South Carolina at sunset, when the pines stretch shadows across the pavement, the air feels still, quiet, safe. But older residents, those who lived through the era of Pee-wee Gaskins, remember differently. They talk about the years when fear traveled those same roads, when families locked doors early, when hitchhikers were warned never to ride with strangers, when every unsolved disappearance sent a shiver through the state. Gaskins may be gone, but his story lingers like a cold breeze through the trees, a reminder that evil doesn't always come in big, loud forms. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a small man with a crooked grin, driving slowly along a country road. And sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're the ones we never suspect until it's far too late.